What's good, y'all? And welcome to another preseason preview video. In today's video, we're going over the Detroit Pistons. In case this is your first preseason preview video of mine that you're seeing, basically what I do is go over all the offseason moves, give a little recap, and then look into the future and try to see what we can expect in this upcoming season. Before we get into it, I want to remind you guys to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. Once you're done watching this video, check out the link in the description. It'll bring you to a playlist of all the other teams that I've already covered. And without further ado, let's take a look at the additions the Pistons made this offseason. The Pistons were active in a bunch of different ways this offseason. In free agency, they went out and signed Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley. They traded for Tim Hardaway Jr. and also drafted Ron Holland from the G League Ignite team. Before we talk about the players, though, I want to highlight the fact that the Pistons have a new head coach. They fired Monty Williams after one season and hired JB Bickerstaff, who most recently has coached the Cleveland Cavaliers. JB was a huge part of accelerating the rebuild for the Cavaliers, and I think that he can do similar things here in Detroit. He has a reputation of being a defensive-minded head coach, and I think he can come in here and just be a new voice in the locker room, reset the culture here in Detroit, and really find their identity. And no disrespect to Monty Williams, but I feel like almost any coach would be better than what Monty was doing last year. It seemed pretty obvious that he did not want to coach the Detroit Pistons. They just threw him a bag he could not decline, and he took it. Can't blame him for it. But I do think JB is going to be a huge upgrade over Monty Williams. And now to talk about the players that they brought in, starting with Tobias Harris. Coming into this offseason, the Detroit Pistons had so much money to spend. I believe they had the most in the NBA. If not, they were definitely in the top 3. And they decided to give a big chunk of that money to Tobias Harris, and I think that's a pretty solid move. I feel like Toby can come in here and just be a veteran presence, a little bit of a steadiness on offense. He's a guy that can play off the ball when Cade Cunningham or Jaden Ivey have the ball in their hands and are creating. But also, when things get tough and the offense gets a little stagnant, he can create his own shot in the mid-range from 3, getting to the rim, and I think that he just adds a lot of value here in Detroit. The other guy they brought in free agency was Malik Beasley, and I also really like this signing. Last year, Detroit struggled a lot with their three-point shooting. It allowed teams to really just collapse the whole court and really just guard the paint because they didn't really have many shooters. Malik Beasley is a super high level shooter in the NBA. Malik doesn't see a lot of shots that he will turn down, and I say that in the best possible way. I think that he's going to be able to come in here and give Detroit that high volume three-point shooting that they really needed. And he'll compete defensively. He's not the best, but he'll at least compete. And when you talk about three-point shooting, Tim Hardaway Jr. is also another guy that's super high volume, will shoot whatever it is as soon as the ball is in his hands. If he has a glimpse of openness, he will shoot the ball. I think that he can definitely help kind of spread the floor here in Detroit as well. And last but certainly not least, they have their rookie 5th overall draft pick, Ron Holland. A lot of people were questioning the fit for this when they drafted Ron Holland, but honestly, at this point of this team, they're just all about getting the best players and the most talent they can. And Ron Holland is oozing with talent. Even though he's only 19 years old, he has an NBA-ready body with his size and length. His athleticism is top tier, can really fly around the court, both with his speed and with his jumping abilities. He's a crafty wing that loves to get to the rim, finish through contact. He has some flashes of being a solid playmaker as well on the wing spot. And I think that he can just come in here and add to the youthful talent that Detroit already has. Of course, you can't bring in guys without losing some, so let's take a look at the guys Detroit lost this offseason. Detroit chose to let James Wiseman and Evan Fournier both walk in free agency. James Wiseman signed a new contract with the Indiana Pacers, and Evan Fournier is now playing overseas. Now, you might be looking at those two losses and being like, yo, why are you telling me about this? That's not really important. Because most of the important losses or changes that happened from Detroit happened mid-season last year with those trades and cuts and stuff. You know, guys like Bojan or Alec Burks, I mentioned before, were traded mid-season to the Knicks. Killian Hayes, he was cut mid-season. Marvin Bagley was traded mid-season to the Wizards. So a lot of the big names and the important pieces that Detroit had They lost them mid-season. When you look at the offseason, though, they didn't really lose too many guys. And now that we know who's came and who's went, let's take a look at a potential rotation we could be seeing from the Pistons. We have some new faces in the starting lineup, but still holding it down. We have Cade Cunningham. Alongside him, we have Jaden Ivey, Malik Beasley, Tobias Harris, and Jalen Duren. And then off the bench, we have Marcus Sasser, Tim Hardaway Jr., Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, Simone Fontecchio, and Isaiah Stewart. So when I do these graphics in these videos, I try to narrow the rotation down to a 9 or 10 man rotation, because that's what most coaches run in the modern NBA. When you see there, obviously there are 11 players there, but I think that's more of a testament to the amount of young talent this team has, and then also the veterans that they brought in to kind of help guide that young talent. And you Pistons fans, I think, should get to know a lot of those faces on that graphic, because I believe that majority of the time it's going to be one of those players on the court. Not like last year. Last year you guys had 31 players play for the Pistons. That sounds insane. There's no way in your mind you could be thinking, we are having a functional basketball team and a functional organization while putting 31 different players on the court. Absolutely insane. And no disrespect to any of those guys, but this year it should be only real NBA players that are on this court. I'm not going to say that the Pistons are going to be taking this huge jump this year, but when you look at the talent-wise, I definitely think the product on the court is going to be way better. No more Killian Hayes getting minutes. No more Kevin Knox or Troy Brown Jr. Again, no disrespect to those guys, but it's going to be completely different in Detroit. And I think that sense of stability is going to help out a lot with these young guys, because there are loads of young guys on this roster. The fact that they're going to be able to come in and know who's going to be playing alongside them majority of the time, I think that's going to be a big help. I kind of alluded to it already before, but also the fact that the veterans that they brought in of Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, and Tim Hardaway Jr., I think all three of those guys are going to also help them on the court, settle things down, kind of just teach them the ropes of what it is to be in the NBA and be an NBA player. And then when you're talking about strictly on the court stuff, I do think Detroit is going to be taking a bunch of steps this year. I think the added shooting that they brought in is going to be loads of help, especially when your main guy is a guy like Cade Cunningham that loves to get to the basket, operate in the pick and roll. It's a lot easier to just shrink the court when you have Isaiah Stewart and Asar Thompson in both corners. Now that'll be Malik Beasley and Simone Fontecchio. It's not easy to just collapse on those guys. Also, I think defensively they could maybe make a little bit of progression. I don't love their personnel, but like I said, JB Bickerstaff is notoriously a defensive-minded coach. I'm sure he's going to be able to implement some schemes to really bring the best out of these guys. And it's just good to see Detroit taking these proper steps. I think this offseason they did an incredible job. Like I said, I don't think they're going to make this huge leap and be a playoff team all of a sudden, but I definitely don't think that they will lose 27 games in a row again, and as a Detroit Pistons fan, I feel like that's all you could really ask for. Now that we have an idea of what this team is going to look like, let's take a look at their biggest strength. The Pistons are one of the youngest teams in the NBA, and their young talent really stands out. As you can see, 7 out of the 11 projected rotational players are under the age of 24. Now, I have said many times before that when you are a rebuilding team, step number 1 is acquire as much young talent as you can. That's literally all you can ask for, is just bring in any type of young guy, bring them in, just have them on the roster. And I know it's been some years since Detroit has really kicked off their rebuild, so you might think that they should be past that point. But honestly, the way they've been operating, no. Unfortunately, they still are on step 1, where it's just gather as much young talent as possible. But I do think that they're finally doing a great job at that, and I think that this is the most young talent they've had since they kicked off their rebuild. And it's not only the amount of talent they have, it's the quality of it too. Cade Cunningham, by far, is the best young talent the Pistons have had in years. I don't think I really need to say anything else about that. By far is the best. Cade Cunningham has the capabilities, he's shown the flashes to be the guy when you're on a competing team. Obviously, the Pistons have been nowhere near that, but when I watch Cade Cunningham play, I think that you can build around him. When you look at the other guys that they've had in the past, it's been guys like Killian Hayes or Sadiq Bey. Again, no disrespect to those guys, but you can see there's a clear difference. And again, it's not just Cade that they have on here. Jaden Ivey has shown a lot of flashes in the past. I know last year was a little shaky. A lot of people want to blame that on Monty Williams. And I mean, when you look at the preseason right now so far, he's looking really good under JV Bickerstaff, so hopefully we can see a lot more of that. But even beyond that, Asar Thompson's coming off a great rookie season. Marcus Sasser, as a second-round pick, is coming off a great rookie season. Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, a lot of these guys have shown promise to be real NBA players and real contributors, maybe even more than that. And that's not something that Detroit has been able to say for the past few seasons. As we all know, though, Detroit definitely has their flaws, so let's take a look at their biggest weaknesses. Being a super young team does have its disadvantages, though. As you see here, the Pistons are seriously lacking in the experience department. This is obviously excluding the top 3 vets that they brought in this offseason, but still, majority of their rotation has barely been in the NBA. If you add up every year of experience of those 8 players I just put on your screen, you will get 15 years in the NBA. Tobias Harris alone has been in the NBA for 13 seasons. And it kind of goes beyond just the experience. I really feel like Detroit just doesn't have an identity. They don't have one thing that you can really point to and say, every night, this is what we're going to do. And they are making steps to build up that identity and that culture by hiring JB Bickerstaff, by bringing in these veteran players. They are making the moves to build it, but as of right now, they still don't have it. But honestly, I do think that their personnel kind of holds them back in that aspect as well, because a lot of these players, we don't even know what their own identity is. So how can you fit into a team identity when you don't even know what player you are? Like I said, Cade Cunningham, in my mind, is marked. I know a lot of people also disagree with that and think that Cade is a bust and doesn't do anything good or whatever. Those people, I think, sadly, are just not watching Detroit basketball. When I watch Cade Cunningham on the court, I have no doubt in my mind he is the guy for Detroit and he is their main building block piece. Besides that, though, I mean, a lot of these guys have pretty big question marks. Like, I'm a pretty big fan of Jalen Duren, but I know a lot of people see him as kind of a Andre Drummond 2.0, where he has these empty stats, is what they call it. You know, he's a great rebounder, interior force, but does he contribute to winning? To be honest, I think that's kind of a valid question, I would say. You know, his defense definitely leaves a lot to be desired, and offensively, as a center, if you're just a role man, you're kind of lacking a little bit. Asar Thompson's another guy that can be this. Defensively, incredible. He's a great athlete, rebounds the ball, all that stuff. Offensively, though, he has no real place and no real, role. Marcus Sasser can also be thrown in that where it's like, is he just a sixth man? Can he be more than that? Is he just more of a, seventh, eighth type of rotational guy? You can go down the list and ask these questions about anyone, whether that's Jaden Ivey or Ron Holland or Isaiah Stewart. My point is, again, if these guys don't know what they do best in the NBA, how can you really piece it all together to get the best out of your team? And then even beyond that, with all this young talent and these question marks around them, when you just look talent for talent, team for team, this team got a lot better. Like I said, they will be having real NBA players, and they won't be having 31 different players play for them in a season. But they still are really early in the process. When Tobias Harris is arguably your second best player, you're not that good. And now it is time for my ceiling, floor, and expectation for the Pistons. Starting off with their ceiling, I could see them being as high as the 12th seed. For a lot of the reasons I was just talking about, I do think that Detroit is still super, super early in their rebuild. Like I said, they're taking steps, which is good because obviously last year they were the worst in the conference. Being the 13th, going from 15 to 13, good jump, good steps. But they still are very far off, and I think at their absolute ceiling, they are still a lottery team. For their floor, I can see them being as low as the 15th seed. I definitely think that they are better on paper than teams like the Nets or the Wizards, but at the same time, they're kind of in that same chunk where it's a lot of young guys, a lot of question marks on the roster, not a lot of top-end talent, so at their absolute worst, I could definitely see them still being the bottom feeder of the East. But when you look at my expectations for the Pistons, I think they'll probably be around that 13th seed. On paper, I do think that they are better than the Wizards and the Nets. I have trust in Cade Cunningham. I have trust in Jaden Ivey. I think that their talent and their vets can kind of help them be better than teams like the Nets and Wizards. But they still kind of are in that same chunk there, so I think they will be towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference. What do you guys think, though? Let me know in the comments below where you think the Detroit Pistons will end in this year's standings. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave it a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. In the description, there's links to all my social medias, so make sure you follow me on all those to keep up to date with me. Catch y'all.